And welcome back to the European Cybersecurity Hub, Summer Hub. My name is Paul Adamson, Chairman of Forum Europe. It's my great pleasure now to introduce the final closing session of today's program, which is a keynote address by Despina Spanu. As you all know, Despina is head of cabinet of Vice President Margaritis Schinas in the European Commission, whose portfolio covers promoting the European way of life. An important part of that, of course, is the security dossier. She's been in this job, Despina, since the end of last year, but before that, for almost 3 years, was Director for Digital Policy, Society, Trust and Cybersecurity at DG Connect at the European Commission, and is also a management board member of ENISA. The theme of Despina's keynote is the new security strategy for the EU, a robust security union to address the challenges of a digitized world. And I'll give in a moment the floor to Despina, just to explain that after her intervention, I will ask some questions, no doubt. But since we now have over 700 people registered for this event, there will be plenty of opportunity for people watching this discussion to ask questions, and we will try and field as many as possible in the time available to us. So without further ado from me, over to you, Despina, and thank you for making the time to do this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me, and welcome to all your distinguished guests, amongst which are many good friends and colleagues of mine. I'm delighted that digital technology allows us to hold such events with such a large participation. So well done to the organizers. It is a very, very impressive opportunity. You certainly are aware of the fact that indeed the Vice President that I'm head of cabinet of, Margaritis Schinas, is in charge of the Security Union, and that the Security Union was indeed one of the areas that President Ursula von der Leyen mentioned when she was talking about the importance of leaving no stone unturned when it comes to protecting our citizens in the European Union. And on top of what we've been building in the last years, because we have had a security union strategy and strands of work for some years now, we also need to see not only the ambition of this political mandate of the European Commission, but now the lessons learned also from a crisis, from the COVID pandemic, which reminded us that there are always areas where we need to invest more and where we may need to do more. We have included, as you have probably seen, in the Commission work program, a new and updated European Security Union strategy that will be adopted in the coming weeks. And I would call upon this fantastic audience to check on our website the publication of the roadmap, which is coming in a few days, and that will give the opportunity to all of you to offer us your comments and your input that will allow us to give a new impetus to the Security Union strategy, because the idea is not just to maintain what we have already built, but to have a more focused and a deeper approach in some areas. Now, I know that the summit is focused on cybersecurity, and indeed, cybersecurity will always be a key pillar in any Security Union strategy that we make, because it is an integral part of our security policy. And I think this is the time to take cybersecurity to the next level. And that means making it part of the overall security agenda and not treating it as a standalone security matter linked more to digital policy, because even digital policy is encompassing so many areas. So this is how we're going to try and deal with cybersecurity in the new strategy. So not only are we going to build on existing elements, but also see where cybersecurity, the security of our online systems, becomes more and more challenging and where we need to invest. We have a very, very important opportunity coming up, as you know, and we have announced this in our Commission work program, the review of the NIS Directive. The NIS Directive was the first ever cybersecurity law. It allowed us to build a very important and robust system for protecting our critical infrastructure in the European Union. It has only been in place for a little time, so we still need to let it unfold, but it is also a good time to see how we can build on it, and I think this will be the aim of this review. Now, we cannot build on our critical infrastructure when it comes to protecting our information systems without looking at the physical aspects, because at the end of the day, cyber threats will always have also a physical impact. This is why we have packaged this review together with a review of the Directive on Critical Infrastructure, which is long overdue, if you allow me to say, It is a directive that has been applying for a long time, and that has a scope that's much more limited than the NIS directive. And as Vice President Skinas has said many times, it is now time to bring into par the protection of digital with the physical infrastructure. And when we speak about critical infrastructure, it will, of course, be very important to continue going deeper in areas of work that is more vertical. I know that the previous panel was discussing 5G and a very well-known piece of work, the toolbox. I think that 5G will continue to be a very important strategic topic, and we will need to continue working cybersecurity in other vertical areas of technologies, new technologies, modern technologies, including artificial intelligence, and see how we invest into artificial intelligence also to ensure our security. And of course, any other new technology, how do we use our new high-performance computers in Europe for that, etc. Of course, to do so, we will need more capacity. We will need better knowledge in cybersecurity. Recently, the COREPER, so the representatives of the member states in the council, gave their agreement to continue the negotiations for the creation of the first ever European Cybersecurity Center. I think that this will be crucial, if not critical, in determining how we will go about cybersecurity, and also building on issues where we have vulnerabilities in Europe, if I can borrow the word. And I'm talking, for instance, about skills. The European Competence Center for Cybersecurity will allow us to pool resources from the whole of Europe, both from the public and the private sector, and to bring them together so that we address a very serious skills gap that we have in cybersecurity and other security areas in the management of new technologies. So it will be very important to have that capacity building from the Cybersecurity Center, not just for skills, but of course for technology, knowledge, and for building on strategic issues. Coupled with that, of course, going beyond critical infrastructure and capacity, we need to continue building on our strengths. In Europe, we have a cybersecurity agency, ENISA. Thank you, Paul, because you announced I was a management board, and I saw from close the evolution and the development of ENISA in the last years, including through its new mandate that has been in force for 1 year almost now. I think it is very important that we continue to invest on the limited but very important capacities of ENISA, and to see also how we rely on ENISA for more operational issues, in particular for countering threats, but also for the area of certification that has been mandated to serve. Now, we speak about cybersecurity, always talking about these areas, and I think it is now time to also bring cyber, as I mentioned, into the next level, linking cyber to cybercrime, for instance. During the COVID crisis, Europol, the European agency that fights crime and that has a very important cybersecurity and cybercrime center and important knowledge, has been reporting about the proliferation and the exponential growth of cybercrime. And cybercrime hits security in the heart of our citizens' homes, in the heart of our businesses, in the heart of our small and medium-sized businesses in Europe. We cannot leave it unattended. It is therefore time to see how do we deal with cybercrime, how do we go to the basics, how do we go to addressing what's happening in the cyber world at a very basic level with very typical attacks that we've been dealing with for years, and how do we create also information systems that will allow us to prevent the spread of this cybercrime. And this will certainly be a key pillar also of the new security union strategy as part of our work on other types of crime, of course. So cybersecurity has to start being seen not in isolation, but linked to other areas. And again, if we're talking about cybercrime, we will have to see how we equip further Europol, that has been tackling and addressing cybercrime for years, with the powers it needs and the responsibility it needs to do so. So the review of the mandate of Europol, as you have seen in our work program, will also be part of this new security union strategy, and its work on cybercrime will certainly be key in this respect. Last but not least, this is the main idea that we will build in our security union strategy, that it has to be an across-the-board approach, a whole-of-society approach, and that's why we need to see how we deal with the issue of hybrid threats. currently in Europe, we have a blueprint that we generated 3 years ago, and on which we have been building on to be able to have a coordinated response in case of large-scale cybersecurity attacks. So we have that blueprint for cybersecurity. We have a different type of agreement between countries in the area of hybrid threats. It is time to see how do we bring all this together. How will we deal one day with a big attack that will arrive in Europe? One of the lessons learned from the COVID crisis is that preparedness is key, and that if we were going to deal with it today, we certainly would have done more about preparedness. So we need to see how we do that for hybrid threats, because at the end of the day, every threat is hybrid. It has a physical and a digital aspect. And if you look at our new challenges like disinformation, this is certainly the case. So this is another key pillar of the new security union strategy, that will of course include fundamental elements that are linked to cybersecurity. This is overall some of the key topics that I wanted to share with you. These are our ideas so far. Of course, we will wait for the input from the roadmap, and we will continue to build on all the work that we have done in the last years. But again, go for a more targeted approach, more focused approach in security matters, and blending cybersecurity as a real security policy. Thank you very much again for inviting me, and I look forward to the questions, Paul.
Thank you very much, Christina. I have a number of questions. The more you spoke, the more I was writing down, the more I was thinking of questions to ask you. My first question is rather obvious, certainly a very topical question. What has been the impact of the pandemic on the drafting of this new security strategy? Did you have to kind of go back to the drawing board and rip off some pages and start again? Or is it given a new focus? That's obviously a new sense of urgency, but did you have to rethink some of the basic principles of the strategy because the pandemic came along?
Well, I think we had to rethink everything we have been doing. This is for sure. But having said that, we have also learned from, when it comes to security, we have also learned from the crisis that we have sufficient systems in place that allow us to at least get some facts. What do I mean for that? The biggest challenge when it comes to security so far with the COVID crisis has been, as I mentioned, cybercrime, a lot of ransomware, but also disinformation, a lot of disinformation campaigns trying to take advantage of the lack of knowledge of people and the vulnerability of people in this time of crisis. And we saw that we managed to have a lot of facts. Europol managed to produce quite a few reports. Now what we need to see is how do we address that? So we knew there was a problem with disinformation campaigns and with cybercrime, but we see that this is an area that has a lot of space to grow in time of crisis. When it comes to cyber attacks, we saw that again, malicious actors went straight to the heart of our critical infrastructure. They went to hospitals, they went to critical systems that were linked to the disease, basically, in the healthcare system. But again, what was very interesting is that we managed to have sufficient information in place for that not to spread further, and that our systems seem to be quite resilient. But again, we did learn some lessons that did not take us very far from our previous findings. But I think the most important lesson was the preparedness, that if in the middle of this pandemic we had something major happening in security, we now need to see how will we deal with it. Do we have enough mechanisms in place, etc.?
And when you're saying it in so many words, you're not putting words in your mouth, that you hope for the strategy to be approved by the Commission before the summer. Is that what you're expecting to be able to achieve? Is that the idea?
The Commission work program has announced that we have to do it in the second quarter, and that expires rather soon. But then again, what will matter is that we do it right. So we will have to see your reactions also to the roadmap.
And the roadmap is in effect another way of describing a kind of consultation process where you have external stakeholders making input.
We always allow a month comment. Yes, so I think that's a good opportunity, and we will make sure we.
Okay. Well, you will know, just being of your long career in the Commission, that it's one thing for the Commission to put out a paper, a strategy, a proposal, and then there's the other thing about the reaction from member states and from the European Parliament. From the discussions you had so far, you and your colleagues, both formal and informal, do you already have in a very broad sense, a feeling of what kind of reaction these other institutional stakeholders will have to the Commission's new strategy paper?
I think that we are working in the direction that our stakeholders, including member states, have been asking us to work. We have gone about security with very careful steps in the European Union because it took a long time before member states decided we needed a European security area, as you know. So I think that we are not here recreating the strategy. We will continue to focus on the building blocks we have put in place. So we're not going to do a new NIS directive. We will continue to build further on it. We're not going to do new agencies. We will need to review their mandates to see if they can manage these challenges. And then, of course, every single piece of legislation will be done with the proper consultations of the co-legislator, of the stakeholders. Then we will have to see.
Right. Okay. We have a question from the audience, Despina. I'll read it out, hopefully verbatim. I would like to ask the question concerning a new cybersecurity strategy mentioned in the Commission's communication on recovery and the new security strategy for Europe. What are the links between those two documents? Cybersecurity on one hand and just ordinary security on the other.
Yes, I think they're inherently linked. We have the overall security union strategy that encompasses all aspects of security work. And then we have a work strand that is called cybersecurity, and that is about the protection of our information systems. It has its own legal basis. It has been developing for the last years quite intensely. So one is part of the other. The cybersecurity strategy is part of our overall security union strategy. But as I mentioned, the security union strategy will seek to also link cybersecurity to all the other fields of security. We need to take it to the next level, as I mentioned.
Okay, a question from an attendee in Washington. What mechanisms exist or need to be established to increase cooperation between the EU and the US? Is there a danger that the challenge of China becomes a means to divide the EU and US rather than fostering cooperation?
I presume this topic was also discussed in the previous panel, whether this is a challenge. I think, well, let me give you an example. Last year, we were holding the regulatory dialogue. I was in Washington in May when we held the regulatory dialogue on ICT issues and including digital policy. And there are, of course, a lot of points of convergence between us and the US. We have naturally very similar tendencies on some security issues. And when it comes to cybersecurity, we are often asked by our US partners how we do things in Europe because we have a very different approach. Their cybersecurity approach comes from the defense side. And in Europe, we have built it from the internal market point of view. And we have a very coordinated approach. So I think there is a lot of space for collaboration. We also kicked off a specific collaboration, including with the private sector, but also with the government on certification, because there's a real opportunity to create global standards. So for me, there's a lot of space. Of course, all depends on what happens on the overall trade relations with the US. The issue of China is, of course, a challenge for everyone. We all have different relations with China, including the US. They have trade relations. We have our own trade relations. But then again, there are individual vertical issues where we need to tackle with our European coordinated approach certain matters, like we have done in the area of 5G, where we didn't go for a country ban or a company ban, but we went rather for a step-by-step approach on how to preserve the integrity and security of our critical infrastructure.
Okay, not exactly a related question, but in the same ballpark. Could Despina talk about the role of the security union in the context of relationships with third countries and global cooperation, particularly around disinformation, which you mentioned briefly, Despina, and election attacks?
Yes, I think we need to go deeper also. When I talk about going deeper, we need to go deeper also in our relations with third countries. We have cyber dialogues with a number of countries, including the United States, but also certain South American countries and certain Asian countries. I think it would be very important that these dialogues become a little bit more concrete, that we pick up issues like disinformation, for instance, and we try to find solutions together. And you know that today the Commission adopted a paper on disinformation during the COVID pandemic, and there the global dimension is actually quite present. We really need to work with other countries to tackle this matter. So I think we can only do better, and we have to use the cyber dialogues with third countries other vehicles.
Okay. We have a question from our colleague Luigi Rebuffi from EXO, who's been helping us put this conference together. Preparedness is key, said Luigi. To be prepared, awareness is key. Will the Security Union strategy tackle awareness on cyber decision makers for informed decision or citizens for responsible behavior beyond what is done by ENISA? And is there a need for specific efforts at the national level?
Yes, I think this is something we launched already with our communication the last time round. We worked on cybersecurity, and I think it may be necessary again to link it to the more general security awareness that we need to bring forward. I tend to think that ENISA is very well equipped for that when it comes to citizens, because they have been doing it for many years and they have been doing it well. But of course, we will need to see how we work. When I mentioned cybercrime, this is a very evident example. We need to work with member states so that there is more tools available. Actually, there have to be more tools available for our citizens, and that in every member state there is a way for citizens to address the authorities when they face problems in the cyber world. Now, when it comes to awareness of the companies and our markets, I think again there is also a work to be done, and this is something we have left unfinished in the last commission that I hope we will be able to do this time around.
Okay, a final question, Despina, then I'll let you go back to your day job. Is it fair to say now that the member states accept and acknowledge and encourage the Commission to take a lead in this broad area of cybersecurity? In the past, if memory serves me right, the conception of the Network Information Security Directive was quite difficult because some member states said this is not an area for EU action. Is there now, not just because of the pandemic, but also other occurrences, a broad recognition that the EU has to take a lead in that, and with the full support of member states?
The greatest lesson of how this has changed for me personally was the negotiation of the Cybersecurity Act, which included the new mandate of ENISA and the new certification framework. And there we saw really a big change of approach by the member states who wish for this coordinated approach. Again, the condition being that we do it together. There always has to be a format between the Commission and the member states in full collaboration. It is also very evident with the evolution of the NIS cooperation group. If you look at the 5G toolbox that you mentioned, this was a collaborative product between the Commission and the member states on a key security matter, on a critical infrastructure matter. And I think this is the way we will be moving forward in the future.
Okay, well, we have to end it there. We've managed to get through quite a few questions in the short time allotted to us. Thank you so much again, Despina. I know how very busy you are, and see you next time. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Many thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Despina. I now hand back to Jane Wilmot to close the session.
Okay, so hopefully you can all hear me this time. So apologies for that earlier. So yeah, thank you, Paul, and thank you very much, Despina, again. Really appreciate the time you've put into this. And thank you, everyone, for your participation today. I'm sure you'll agree that it's been heavy on content, with more to come tomorrow, so we're looking forward to that. We start bright and early tomorrow at around 9:10 CEST with a keynote speech from John Suffolk from Huawei, and that'll be followed by a session looking at global supply chains in the post-COVID recovery phase. And this will then be followed by a speech from the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Margrethe Vestager, where we will then head into a session after that looking at digital sovereignty. You can find the full schedule of the agenda on the website, and you'll also shortly be receiving email details of how to watch all of the replays of today's event. So with that, thank you once again, and we'll see you back here tomorrow for the concluding sessions of the European Cybersecurity Hub. So thank you.